and welcome again to this next video around custom blueprints in Amazon CodeCatalyst. And today we're going to once again look at our more complex project where the idea is that we start from our custom blueprint master that we already have built in by the CodeCatalyst team. We're going to build an API gateway blueprint that has the main API gateway. We're going to build a blueprint that is able to add an additional path to an API gateway, and then we're going to have an additional blueprint focused on adding a security workflow to it. The project structures that we're looking to build kind of can be described as this one. As I mentioned, we have the API gateway blueprint, which has the main API gateway, the endpoint, and the Lambda function. And we have a security team blueprint, which focuses on a workflow. And we have a sub API blueprint, which can be added multiple times to this project. It consumes an API gateway ID and will attach a new endpoint, so a new path to the existing API gateway with either a Lambda function or DynamoDB behind it. And it will also include an additional workflow. We already looked a little bit into the details around how this works when setting things up. Now, this is the project created from from these blueprints. As you can see, there is the blueprint added once. There's two blueprints added that have an additional API, and there's the security team blueprint. Now, what I want to do today is I would like to look at the code that is behind this. So as I already explained before, all of these are separate projects, so I can clone them within my Visual Studio Code, and this is what we're going to look at. So we can see over here, we have this API gateway blueprint, and we have the additional API, and we have the blueprint of the security team. Let's start with the easiest one, because this is the blueprint of the security team. This really is meant to just only add one workflow. As we looked at before, we have a source file. We do have a static assets file over here. It's not yet cleaned up from all of the stuff that we don't need anymore, right? But in theory, we should not have any static assets here, but maybe some documentation. The blueprint itself, however, has an option, which options parameter, which takes as an input the environment and the AWS account name and the role to be used. This is just because we might need that when accessing our security tools going forward. And then what it does is it interacts with the context object of the blueprint. And this is a very fantastic, cool thing that you can use to look at how does the project look like that you're generating into, or how is the content of the blueprint look like that you're generating into. So if you look into the information that you have over here in the context, you will see a space name, you will get an environment ID, you get a phase of Re-Synth Strategies, branch name, root directory, root directory, npm configuration, a package configuration, and the project information. In our use case today, we're going to interact with the project object. This project object then has details around source folders. It has information about repositories that you have. And this is also what we're going to use over here, right? So we have, we're going to list the repository names. That's what we're doing here. Then we are verifying if there is a repository already added to this project. If yes, then if no, well, if there is more than one, we're going to throw an error. This is a way to handle requirements for the blueprint. And if the length is null, is 0, we cannot assume that there is a source directory created. So we're going to create it over here, right? But ideally, we would be reusing the existing source repository name of the project to then, and this is the cool part over here, we're building our security workflow, which is going to be triggered when things are being pushed to the main directory. As you can see, it's not really meaningful yet, but I really want to show you the concept on how to do that. One additional thing that is important here, we have set up the Re-Synth Strategies. This means that every time that this blueprint is going to be used, we're going to be overwriting the workflow as well. And I think that's important as well when we look at how this project is being built. And as I can see, I've not implemented it in the way that I wanted it to be. So I think we need to change that a little bit, right? So this one gives the Re-Synth strategy for the added blueprints, but it does not set the same thing up for our workflow that we have been creating, right? And this is what we also want. We want others to not update these, be able to update this workflow, right? We want the security team to be the owner of the current workflow. For security workflow, this is going to be in the, when it's generated, it's going to be in the CodeCatalyst, and then, so .CodeCatalyst and workflows, and then the workflow name is going to be the one that we add over here, right? So I'm going to make sure that this is then also going to be the name of this one. Okay, we will also always update this. So what the blueprints also do is that they empower you to build an ownership file. So you can use this blueprint ownership file to ensure that code owners is being created, and we're going to add that here as well. So okay, now we have done a change. Let's have a look on how this blueprint generates out stuff. The way that you do that is, as I think I already showed you before, in the terminal, you're going to execute npm run or yarn if you want to blueprint preview, which is going to generate, oh no, not preview, sorry, this was blueprint, and then synth was the correct command, which is now going to synthesize your blueprint locally and to this directory. So now we hopefully will see that there is a CodeCatalyst file generated. That is the security workflow, which contains our workflow, but we also generated an ownership file, which now tells us that we are forcing the security workflow by this blueprint, and this is forcing this file to be not changed by anything else. And also other blueprints will now respect this ownership file going forward. So that's one of the tips that I think you should be aware of when building your own blueprints. Another thing that I did over here is, as today, blueprints do not have a possibility to see which other blueprints have been added to the project already, but this might be interesting for some of the integration stuff that we want to do. I've created my own added blueprints JSON that I'm updating here, and where I will see information about the added blueprints to this project. So if we look over here, we should have this file generated, which now has the CodeCatalyst blueprint only over there. Cool, so this is the security blueprint, which is the easiest one, and looking at the clock I can see that I only spent 9 minutes talking about this, which actually shows how complex building blueprints can be. All right, going to be a little bit quicker when looking on the others. So let's look at the API gateway blueprint, which is the main API gateway, to remind us what that means. We're going to look at the picture again. This is a CDK project that contains an API gateway, contains an endpoint, contains a Lambda function, and contains some workflows, right? And I'm highlighting the fact that this is going to be a CDK Typescript project, because I think that this needs to be improved a little bit more when working with blueprints. Once again, let's start looking at the source file, and in the blueprint over here, you can see that it starts once again with options. We are defining a source repository name, which we can set in the options dialog. We will then copy all finds from the static asset directory again. We are then adding a workflow for the main branch, adding a workflow for the PR, and that's about it, right? Adding the workflows, I will not go into details, but you can add any kind of steps that you want to do. The main challenge for me now here is that within the static assets directory over here, what I do have in fact is a Typescript project that actually needs to be able to work and compile afterwards, right? So what I've done in the static assets directory is I have a package JSON, I have a tsconfig, I have a CDK JSON, I have an API gateway, which is the stack itself, right? So this is our API gateway stack. And I have a bin, which would be the CDK application that is actually going to be triggered. What you see, and this is one of the things that I don't really know yet how to resolve, that is, in this folder, this project cannot and is not compiling, right? And that's one of the problems over here, that it's really hard to triage whether the project is actually, whether it compiles, whether it has problems or not. So the test cycles are pretty long. You also see that here I can write plain CDK code in the way that you would also want to do that. I have this HTTP API which I'm creating, which is an API gateway. I have one integration that points to a Lambda method. I'm adding that root. That Lambda method then is in our Lambda folder and is supposed to expose all of the roots that are currently added to the existing API gateway. That's cool because we will then see how many of our sub APIs have we added to this project. Now, let's look at the sub project. This is, you can see this as a pattern because you can do that with other stuff as well, with other similar examples as well. Over here, we now have once again the options. The options is only environment and account connection. We actually wouldn't need that, but because we could assume that it's already there. Then we have the main API ID here. This is also, once again, we could assume that we can get that from the project. Today it's not possible because we cannot access deployments from a workflow. And then we have the sub API path, which would be our target. If we look back into how this looks like over here, right? The sub API path is one's details and one's myththreads, just to have this as an example. This means I can add the same blueprint multiple times, and after adding it twice, I would now expect the info path in the API gateway, the details path in the API gateway, and the myththreads path in the API gateway. The blueprint then starts again with checking if there is a repository added. If there is no repository added, it will create one. Then it does something that is called a substitution asset. Right, so it is able to, we are able to within blueprints do mustache submissions or substitutions, and what that means is that the moment that this thing is reading this markdown files over here, right? Here we have a sub API path. What this will replace a variable sub API path that we see over here, denoted by these two variables with inputs that I'm giving to that piece, right? And essentially that's what I do over here, right? I set up this variable and give it the subpath over here. And this is what I'm then also using when creating the stack and the Lambda function for the sub API, because it cannot be named the same. It needs to be named different. So I'm reusing that. And now it gets complicated because this means that in the static file that I'm using here, I need to have the sub API path as part of my actual CDK code. So how does this look like? Over here, I do have my sub API stack. My sub API stack is then sub API path, right? And I'm using that as part of the ID and as part of the path when calling this construct. The construct, however, has specific things. It can be a Lambda or a DynamoDB integration. I can choose that based on the input parameters that the user gives to the blueprint. Pretty complicated stuff, I would say, right? And I think this is where also I see that building custom blueprints will become more difficult going forward. It's very difficult, and you really need to pick the use case on how you want to look at building blueprints. So I would leave it with this right now, giving you a short introduction on how this blueprint actually looks like. And I would want to, as last part of this video, show you how does the project look like that it created out of this one. So here I have now this project, which is called From API Gateway Blueprint. and I will show you first the workflows that have been generated. You will see that we have multiple workflows here. We have the main API workflow, we have the main PR API workflow. Those are the two that are being created by the main blueprint. We then have the sub workflow for misfits. We have the sub workflow for the details, because those are the two types that I've added to this blueprint so far. And then we have the security workflow, which is the workflow that's created from the security blueprint. Now, let's try this for another time. So what I can do, as I mentioned, I can go over here and add a third time this blueprint. And I really hope that this is not going to fail, as I did not test that before. So I'm going to select this one as an additional API. And I will give it a parameter that I will call recording. So there's still work to do, because ideally I would not need to submit this generated API ID. I would just read that from the project. That's not possible. By adding a recording over here, I can now see what will be generated. And as you can see, I will see the recording stack. I will see the recording lambda function. Once again, I can get the construct over here that will be generated. And I also see the workflow that will be generated over here. Brand new and just released yesterday is the logs tab. So I'm now able to see the logs of my project synthesis, right? And this is really helpful if you have problems in the generation of the project source code, right? So this is really cool addition that the team added over the last days. So let's apply this blueprint. I'm gonna make sure that I select something here, and let's click on apply blueprint. This is going to take 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we're going to hopefully see in our project that now we have a combination that has a third API gateway included. And I'm going to show you that by doing a git pull on my local directory, right? So now we should be seeing that there's another entry over here, but I might need to reload that. Oh yeah, there we are, right? So this is now the alias. The head has not been added over here. Let's do that quickly. Edit alias is recording. So we kind of keep track of what parameters, input parameters we had for this version. We also saw that there is a pull request created, which we will need to approve now. We can see what happened, what the options are, what has been changed. We can also see the files, the code that has been generated. So I'm just going to quickly click on merge, as we have seen that before. This is going to now show me the merge screen. And now I have my API gateway from Blueprint, and let's do a git pull. And now we will see that there is new files coming in, and these new files are essentially the recording lambda and the recording stack that we have, which now will be showing up in my Visual Studio Code as well. So I now have in the source file over here, I have lambda, I have the details, the misfits, and the recording lambda. As you can see over here, we are not doing anything meaningful here, and that's not the point. In the stack, we will see now that this is now the recording path. The path that we're submitting to the construct is recording. The backend is assuming to have a lambda function as well. And now we see that in this project, we're also going to get highlighted the problems that we have. And this is not working out, right? So I would need to add here a construct parameter to include this. And then I get the next headline, which says I need to do a new. And that's what I faced when developing blueprints being a real issue, right? You only get the real compile and error messages after you have created a blueprint project out of your blueprint, and you don't have the possibility to see that within building the blueprints. And here I think it's very early stages for the custom blueprints in CodeCatalyst. There will be some improvements that make that easier, and looking forward to see them coming in going forward as well. So let's look back at what we built. We built 3 custom blueprints in this project in the last 20 minutes. One of them has an API gateway. The other one adds an additional path to an existing API gateway. And the last but not least, the most important one, adds a security workflow to our project. Now, this project is consisting of multiple blueprints over here. It generates one code base. It generates one set of workflows that you can actually then also use and interact with, where you can really also force stuff to be included over there, right? And I think this is pretty powerful. There's a lot of integration patterns that you could think of. And yeah, I would encourage you to give it a go. And if you hit up any problems and questions with the custom blueprints, please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, reach out to me on LinkedIn, or maybe even also use the comments here on YouTube. Looking forward to be part of your CodeCatalyst Blueprints journey with you, and looking forward to see what you build. I have a lot of cool ideas on what blueprints can do. Yeah, thanks a lot for watching. And if you liked this type of content and the details that I've been giving, please subscribe to the channel. If you do have anything that you would like me to dive deep into and then present or give you guidance on, please let me know. Looking forward to make you successful with using custom blueprints or using CodeCatalyst in general, or even CI/CD. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.